Welcome to today's in-flight lesson summary, the effects of controls. We have just started our engine and completed our pre-takeoff checks, and we will now be taxiing to the runway. To start moving, we need to increase our power. We do this by moving the throttle gently forward. To slow down, we need to decrease power, and we do this by moving the throttle gently rearwards. For taxiing, only small amounts of power are required to move the aircraft on the ground. Depending on your aircraft type, the brake can be a handbrake or toe brakes. On this aircraft, it is a handbrake. It is important to have the hand ready to use the brake if required. We should use power for controlling our speed on the ground and the brake for slowing down and stopping. In this aircraft, we have a steerable nose wheel. To taxi right, I simply apply pressure on the right rudder pedal, and to taxi left, I simply apply pressure on the left rudder pedal. Small, gentle applications of pressure on the rudder pedal is required to maintain directional control. It is important to taxi the aircraft no faster than a brisk walking pace, and in strong winds or when close to other aircraft, you may need to taxi at a slow walking pace. If your aircraft has toe brakes, it is important to have your heels on the ground while steering, unless using the brakes. It is very important while flying that your eyes are forward on the horizon for the majority of the time, the horizon being the primary reference. I will now demonstrate the primary effect of the elevator. When I move the control column gently rearwards, the aircraft pitches up in relation to the horizon, and the gap between the nose of the aircraft and the horizon gets smaller. Now returning to level flight. When I move the control column forward, the aircraft pitches down in relation to the horizon, and the gap between the nose of the aircraft and the horizon gets bigger. Now returning to level flight. The primary effect of the elevator is pitch. I will now demonstrate the primary effect of the ailerons. Eyes forward on the horizon. When I move the control column to the right, the aircraft will roll to the right, returning to wings level. When I move the control column to the left, the aircraft will roll to the left, returning to wings level. The primary effect of the ailerons is roll. I will now demonstrate the primary effect of the rudder. Eyes forward on the horizon. When I apply pressure to the right rudder pedal, the aircraft will yaw to the right. When I apply pressure to the left rudder pedal, the aircraft will yaw to the left. The primary effect of the rudder is yaw. We will now look at the further and secondary effects of the controls. I will now demonstrate the further effect of the elevator. Eyes forward on the horizon. When I move the control column rearward, the nose pitches up in relation to the horizon, and the airspeed starts to decrease, returning to level flight. When I move the control column forward, the nose pitches down in relation to the horizon, and the aircraft's airspeed starts to increase. The further effect of the elevator is airspeed. I will now demonstrate the secondary effect of the ailerons. Eyes forward on the horizon. When I move the control column to the right, the aircraft rolls to the right. Initially, the aircraft may momentarily yaw in the opposite direction of the roll. Then the aircraft starts slipping towards the lower wing, then yaws in the same direction as the roll. We will now return to wings level. When I move the control column to the left, the aircraft rolls to the left. Initially, the aircraft may yaw to the right, then the aircraft starts slipping towards the lower wing, then yaws in the direction of the roll. We will now return to level flight. The secondary effect of roll is adverse yaw, slip, then yaw. I will now demonstrate the secondary effect of the rudder. Eyes forward on the horizon. When I apply pressure to the right rudder pedal, the aircraft will initially yaw right, then skid, then roll right. When I apply pressure to the left rudder pedal, the aircraft will yaw left, then skid, then roll left. The secondary effect of yaw is skid, then roll. I will now demonstrate the effect that the airspeed has on the aircraft control surfaces. The aircraft is currently flying at our normal cruise speed of 100 knots. At this speed, the controls feel firm and responsive. I'm now going to slow the aircraft down. The airspeed is now 77 knots, and the controls feel less firm and less responsive. I'm now going to increase our airspeed to above our normal cruise speed. The controls now feel very firm and very responsive. In relation to the effect of airspeed on the aircraft, at lower airspeeds, the controls feel less firm and less responsive. We call this sloppy controls. And at higher airspeeds, the controls feel more firm and more responsive. In some stages of flight, for instance during takeoff and climb at full power, the elevator and rudder will feel firm due to the effect of the propeller slipstream, and the ailerons will be less firm. The ailerons are outside of the slipstream, so feel less responsive. As we can see, in some phases of flight, such as takeoff or climbing, our rudder and elevator can feel firm and responsive, but the ailerons may feel sloppy. I will now demonstrate the effect that power and propeller slipstream has on the aircraft. The aircraft is now balanced and stable. If I take my hands off the controls, the aircraft remains stable in straight and level flight. I'm now going to increase the power to full power, and as you can see, the aircraft is pitching up in relation to the horizon and yawing left. I will now return to level flight. If I now reduce the power, we can see the aircraft is pitching down in relation to the horizon and yawing right. As I've just demonstrated, when I increase power, the nose pitches up and yaws left, and when I decrease power, the nose pitches down and yaws right. I will now demonstrate the ancillary or secondary controls of the aircraft. On this aircraft, we have an electric trim. Positioned at the front of the control stick is the down trim button, and at the back of the control is the up trim button. If the aircraft is trimmed correctly, I can take my hands off the controls and the aircraft flies straight and level. However, if for example during straight and level flight the pilot can feel forward pressure on the controls, meaning the control column or control stick wants to move forward and the aircraft wants to pitch down, then this means we have too much down trim. To alleviate this forward pressure on the controls, we just use the opposite trim, which is up trim, to relieve the pressure on the controls. Likewise, if the pilot can feel rearward pressure on the controls, can feel that the controls wanting to move rearward and the aircraft wanting to pitch up, then there is too much up trim selected. To alleviate this rearward pressure on the controls, we just use the opposite, which is down trim, to relieve the pressure on the controls. Trim is used to relieve the pressure on the control column. It is important not to fly the aircraft using the trim, but use the controls to fly the aircraft and use the trim only to relieve the pressure on the control column. I will now demonstrate the use and effect of the flaps. In this aircraft, the flaps are electrically operated. Firstly, we have to slow the aircraft down, as most aircraft have a flap extension limiting speed, and we do not want to extend the flaps over this speed. We are now extending the flaps. There is a very slight change in pitch when selecting flaps. This change in pitch may vary depending on whether you are flying a high wing or low wing aircraft. The extension of the flap creates more lift and allows us to fly at a slower airspeed. The flaps are a lift generating device. Some aircraft have a carburetor heat selector that would be activated by the pilot when flying in areas of high moisture or at low power settings with high visible moisture to help avoid or eliminate carburetor ice. This Rotax engine has a full-time carburetor heat, meaning it is always on, and so there is no carburetor heat selector manual control. Thanks for joining me today for the effects of controls in-flight summary. Please complete the quiz at the end of this lesson to test your knowledge. Happy and safe flying, and see you next time on Go Fly Online.